Hi, my name is Keisha. This is Unspoken History. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I want to talk about Claudette Colvin. I hope I said that right. Colvin. I learned about her about maybe 4 years ago. Um, how she was the first person to not give up her seat on the bus before Rosa Parks, but Rosa Parks was chosen to be the face of the movement. So I'm just going to read a couple articles that I found that kind of covers what I want to cover, or kind of gives us a good idea of what went on and how it came to be that it was Rosa and not Claudette. Okay, so this article is from history.howstuffworks.com. What people get wrong about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. Okay, most of us know Rosa Parks as a Negro American woman who quietly but firmly refused to give up her seat to a white person. That small act of resistance sparked the year long Montgomery bus boycott, which in turn kickstarted the national efforts to end racial segregation. Now, what actually kickstarted it was the execution or lynching, whatever you want to call it, of a teenager named Jeremiah Reeves. He was having a relationship with a white woman, a white. Well, the woman was probably a couple years older than him. Maybe she was 21 and he was 16. Um, but when they got caught, she said he raped her, and so they took him to jail. Of course, a bunch of white people, a bunch of white men took him to jail, strapped him to the electric chair, and made him confess to all of the rapes that happened that summer. And of course, he did because he was afraid. He was strapped to an electric chair with a bunch of white people around him saying, "Confess, or we're gonna electrocute you." Of course, yes, I did it. So when that happened, because this Jeremiah Reeves was friends with Claudette Colvin, they went to school together. They lived in the same neighborhood, and apparently everybody in the neighborhood knew that Jeremiah was having, well, in the black portion of the neighborhood, knew that Jeremiah Reeves was having an um, affair or whatever you want to call it with this woman. Um, her name was Mabel Ann Crowder. Mabel Ann Crowder. And so, and what's funny is you can't find nothing on Mabel Ann Crowder. Not a thing. Find a little headstone with her name on it, but I don't know if that's the same one. So I guess she just disappeared from existence after this because there's absolutely nothing. Okay, so when this happened to Jeremiah, it says right here, it says, while winding its way through courts, Jeremiah's case also became a flashpoint for the Montgomery civil rights movement. Claudette Colvin, who was arrested at 15 for refusing to give up her seat to a white woman on a Birmingham bus in March 1955, was inspired to take that protest action as a show of support for Jeremiah because he was her friend and classmate. And so she later became the plaintiff in the Browder versus Gale, the case that led the Supreme Court to order buses desegregated in 1956. So Rosa Parks wasn't even a part of the court case. It was Claudette. Now, um, I'm going to go back and talk about why she was 15. You know, they had a lot of reasons, okay? I heard one of the articles say, I don't have it up here, but one of the articles said it was because she was too dark. That was one of the reasons. She was too dark, and then she got pregnant a short while after. She didn't give up her seat, and so that wasn't the image they wanted us to represent. I understand that, but you didn't have to totally leave her out, like totally. But anyway, so let's go back to this. Okay, um, so Rosa Parks should not be known for, like, that's basically all she's known for. Like, she didn't do anything else. She's only known for the Montgomery Bus Boycott. So it says four facts. Here are four facts and four myths about Parks that will help you better understand this important historical figure. I don't want to take anything away from her, but I want to give back to Claudette what belongs to her, which is the legacy of the Montgomery Bus Boycott. She did that. Okay. It says Parks came from a family of activists. She was born February 4th, 1913, to James and Leona McCauley. The couple separated 2 years later, and Parks' mother moved the family and her parents to her parents' farm in Pine Level, Alabama. Parks' grandparents, Rose and Sylvester Edwards, were formerly enslaved persons who strongly believed in racial equality. Why wouldn't they? Okay. One of Parks' early memories was of her grandfather standing guard with his shotgun as the KKK marched down their street. In 1932, when she was 19, Rosa McCauley married Raymond Parks, an active member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So she married the president of the NAACP when she was 19. So she was 42 when the bus boycott happened. So I'm sure she had done plenty of things with the NAACP in that 22 years or 23 years, however long it was. It says, was her only activism just refusing to give up her seat? No, Parks began her civil rights activism shortly after graduating from high school and continued until shortly before her death in 2005 at age 92. Uh, excuse me, she served for years as secretary to the president of the NAACP Montgomery chapter. Okay. Um, so the situation with Rosa and the bus is that 12 years before Parks refused to give up her bus seat, she boarded a bus driven by James E. Blake. Blake often made derogatory remarks to African Americans, especially women. He also made blacks get off his bus after paying, then reboard in the rear. Sometimes he'd drive away before they got back on the bus. When Parks boarded Blake's bus in 1943, he tried to make Parks reboard after paying. She refused, and he tried to push her off the bus. After that, she avoided Blake's bus, no matter what. But on that fateful day, she didn't notice Blake was the driver when she stepped on the bus. So, um, in 1955, it says the myth is December 1st, 1955, she sat in the whites only section. In 1955, Montgomery buses only had 36 seats. The first 10 were for whites. The middle 16 were first come, first serve, with priority given to whites. The last 10 were for blacks. Parks sat down in the first, she sat down in the first row of the middle seat next to a black man. That's what she's supposed to sit. Two black women sat across the aisle. The other blacks got up when Blake told them to. Parks, of course, did not. Parks, okay. And then it says, several months before Parks refused to give up her seat, 15-year-old Claudette, I don't know why I be botching up this last name, Claudette Colvin, did the same thing. But unlike Parks, Colvin made a scene and was physically removed by police officers. Some say Parks' refusal ignited the boycott and not Colvin's because Parks was calm and polite and an older woman. So, because she was polite, now we do remember the whole civil rights movement was a nonviolent. Thank you to Martin Luther King Jr. Nonviolent, although there was nothing but violence against him. So that sounds like that docile. If you didn't watch, if you watch my video part 1, Negro slave revolts. Oh, it's over 300 Negro slave revolts part 1. not the one that doesn't say part one, but the one that says part one. Um, the guy in the book, American Negro Slavery Revolts, was talking about how um, they were describing Negroes as like imaginative little children. They're so docile and obedient. And then Martin Luther King come along and said, let's do this nonviolent. It's been violence against them. By that time, it had been almost 400 years of violence against them. No weapons to defend themselves, just straight violence. And then Martin come along and say, hey, let's go out here and walk and don't defend ourselves. Now, whenever we try to get anything, we try to come together for anything, we build anything, people are allowed to destroy it. So he had us out there. I wasn't out there because I wasn't born. He had them out there walking, getting water sprayed on them, pepper spray, batons, go to jail, all of this. And then at the end of the civil rights movement, what did they get? You know, okay, that's information for another video. But what I recently found out was that another civil rights, another immigration act was written at the same time that the Civil Rights Act was written. So we all out, I'm sorry, I said we again. They all out there marching and things for freedom and for their own rights. And then they write an immigration act. Back to Claudette. Um, it says, um, it says one of the myths was she remained seated because she was tired, Rosa. Parks did not refuse to give up her seat because her feet hurt. I was not tired physically, she wrote in her autobiography, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me as being old then. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in. All right. So, in March 1955, 9 months before Rosa Parks defied segregation laws by refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, 15-year-old Claudette Colvin did exactly the same thing. Eclipsed by Parks, her act of defiance was largely ignored for many years. That would be decades. She herself didn't talk about it much, but she spoke recently to BBC. Now, this article is how old? Let's see. This is BBC.com. This was in 2018. Okay, 2018. There was segregation everywhere. This is Claudette speaking here. There was segregation everywhere. The churches, buses, and schools were all segregated, and you couldn't even go into the same restaurants. Claudette, Claudette says, I remember during Easter one year when I was to get a pair of black patent shoes. They were probably patent leather, patent shoes, but you could only get them from the white stores. So my mother drew an outline of my feet on a brown paper bag in order to get the closest size because we weren't allowed to go in the store to buy them or to try them on. So you can buy them, but you can't try them on. You got to buy them first, and then once you try them on, if you can't fit them, too bad. Okay, it says going to a segregated school had one advantage she found. Her teachers gave her a good grounding in Black history. Going to segregated schools, we learned about Negro spirituals, recited poems, but my social studies teacher went into more detail, she said, and taught them more things about the Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. And what else? And I think one article says she was a part or a member of the NAACP, so she wanted to learn more about activism and fighting for your rights and stuff like that. Um, it says on March 2nd, 1955, Colvin and her friends finished their classes and were let out of school early. We walked downtown And my friends and I saw the bus and we decided to get on. It was right across the road from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Dr. Martin Luther King's church. The white people were always seated in front of the bus, and the black people seated in the back of the bus. The bus driver had the authority to assign the seats, so when more white passengers got on the bus, he asked for the seats. The problem arose because all the seats on the bus were taken. Colvin and her friends were sitting in a row a little more than halfway down the bus. Two were to the right side of the bus and two to the left, and a white passenger was standing in the aisle between them. The driver wanted all of them to move to the back and stand so that the white passenger could sit. He wanted me to give up my seat for a white person, and I would have done it for an elderly person, but this was a young white woman. Three of the students had gotten up reluctantly, and I remained seating next to the window, she says. Under a twist of logic, it says under the twisted logic of segregation, the white woman still couldn't sit down. And then it says under the twisted logic of segregation, the white woman still couldn't sit down, and then white and black passengers would have been sharing a row of seats. And the whole point was that white passengers were meant to be closer in the front. Okay. So it says, whenever people ask me, why didn't you just get up when the bus driver asked you to get up? I said, I felt as though Harriet Tubman had one hand on one shoulder and Sojourner Truth had one hand on the other shoulder. And they were pushing me down saying, girl, don't you get up out that seat. That's not what she said. She said, I felt inspired by these women because my teachers taught us about them in so much detail, she said. I was frightened but disappointed and angry because I knew I was sitting in the right seat. And the driver kept going, but stopped when he reached a junction where a police squad car was waiting. The policeman boarded the bus and asked Colvin why she wouldn't give up her seat. She said, I was more defiant and then they knocked I was more defiant and then they knocked my books out of my lap and one of them grabbed my arm. I don't know how I got off that bus, but the other students said that they manhandled me off the bus and put me in the squad car. But what I do remember is when they asked me to stick my arms out the window. But what I do remember is when they asked me to stick my arms out the window, and that's when they handcuffed me, Coleman says. She said her mother was proud of her but afraid something would happen to her. Instead of being taken to juvenile detention, Colvin was taken to the adult jail and put in a small cell with nothing in it but a broken sink and a cot without a mattress. I was scared and it was really, really frightening. I was like it was like those Western movies where they put you, where they put the bandit in the jail cell and you could hear the keys. And I could still vividly hear the keys, the keys click, the click of the keys as they were locking the door. I waited for 3 hours until my mother arrived with the pastor to bail me out. So what had happened was, that's how the kids said. So a 15-year-old dark-skinned Negro girl, and some people think it was because she was too dark. Dark-skinned Negro girl just was tired. She had just lost her friend. He had just been murdered, and he had done anything. If this woman was older than him, and I don't know, he was only 16. Sounds like molestation to me. But anyway, you can make a 16-year-old man when he's black, and then it's a child when he's not so black. But anyway, this was supposedly a grown woman. She had her own house. He was still a high schooler in school. And he probably thought, ooh, this older woman liked me. And was sneaking around with this woman. And then when they got caught, she said, rape. Which that was still going on in the 80s. So um, after Jeremiah was executed, they actually waited till he was 21. It's a whole thing. Um, Thurgood Marshall actually did get his case taken to the Supreme Court and heard by the Supreme Court. and the Supreme Court sent it back to the local court, which according to the Constitution, if a person is not going to get a fair trial in their state, it's supposed to be taken up by the Supreme Court. But you know what they did? They sent it back to the local judge and said it was wrong of you to refuse to hear his confession without torturing him or hear any information other than that torturous confession. Okay. And they said, okay. And they did it again. And then they just executed him. We gave him another trial, Supreme Court. All of that was illegal. Claudette said that it was her constitutional right to be able to sit in that seat, and she was right. But again, they said their segregation laws trumped that whole constitution. Okay. So she was upset because she just lost her friend. I would have been too, especially if he hadn't done anything wrong and they tortured that poor child. Of course. I don't know why people get pleasure out of torture. But anyway, if you have in your mind, because it's been taught to you for over 100 years, I know I said 70 years a couple of days ago, but that was because the guy wrote the book in 1900. And when the other guy wrote the other book about the slavery votes in 1969, they were still calling people monsters and beasts and dogs and wolves and whatever. So when her friend was murdered, I think she had this feeling of defiance in her. And it just rose up that day. That day, she don't know how she got off the bus because she was on 10. Okay. Her friends had to tell her how they got her off that bus. Because she said, not today. I paid my 25 cents, just like Miss Sally over there. And I ain't giving up my seat. Well, they took her out that seat and put her in jail. So it is a good thing that nothing happened to her. She was able to live out her life, her full life. There's a little video clip of her online as an older woman talking about how she didn't care. She didn't care that that her name didn't go down in history. She just wanted things to be right. She wanted people to have their rights and for this segregation to stop happening. That's all she was concerned about. But of course, we have those other black people, the ones that don't like to be called Negroes. They want to be called African. So they were the ones wanting to keep up a good image, because we gotta make sure that our image is right. Can't be a pregnant girl or a 15-year-old girl because she wasn't pregnant when it happened. She didn't get pregnant until afterwards. We can't have a 15-year-old girl representing this big movement, but she started it. Just saying. It could have been both of them. They could have did it together because Rosa was having problems on the bus, and she was tired of it too. But she just didn't start the movement, and she wasn't part of the Supreme Court case. It was Claudette Colvin. Okay, let's see what else she says about herself. Um, she said that I was more defiant, and then they knocked my books out of my lap, and one of them grabbed my arm, and I don't know how I got off the bus. But the other students said that they manhandled me off the bus. So she was probably swinging arms and legs and everything. Okay, so um, it said after Colvin was released from prison, there were fears that her home would be attacked. Members of the community acted as lookouts while Colvin's father sat up all night with a shotgun in case the KKK turned up. Okay, so I'm sure there is a lot more information out there that you can find on Claudette. Maybe there's some books at the library. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go and check and see if I can find anything else. because the articles are scarce and they all say the same thing. But apparently, she was very active in activism against racial segregation and discrimination, and she was a member of the NAACP. And she just continued to use her voice in her activism to speak out against injustice, as we all should. Thank you for joining me. Um, I think I'm going to do um, a little bit more information. I'll do a little video on the Jeremiah Reeves story. Jeremiah Reeves and I forgot what the lady's name was already. Mabel Ann Crowder. So yeah, do a little video on that, and then I'm going to um, add another installation of the slave revolt. So I'm going to find a story in there instead of reading chapter 2. I'm going to pull out the story. I want to read the stories about the actual slave revolts because we know why we didn't hear about them. That was in the first chapter, talking about they said, we were too docile. They're not uprising. There were no slave revolts, but there were plenty. So I wanna kind of talk about those individual slave revolts. So I'm gonna look through the book, find some stories, share those stories with you. Okay. Thanks for joining me today. Like and subscribe and share the video. Thank you. See you next time.